Good afternoon and welcome to the Colorado Health Foundation's Creating Healthy Schools webinar. My name is Annie Strajewski and I'm the Communications Associate here at the Foundation, as well as your chairperson for today's webinar. Let's go ahead and get started with some housekeeping notes. Our webinar today is being recorded so that others who could not attend can watch the presentation later. Tomorrow you will receive a link to this recording as well as the PDF presentation that we will go over today. We'll also post the recording and the presentation on our website at www.coloradohealth.org. In order to minimize background noise, your phones will be muted in a listen-only mode during the presentation. The final portion of our webinar is devoted to questions. Please feel free to send your questions via the chat function at any time during the presentation. You should see a chat dialog area located on the lower left-hand side of your screen where you may type and send questions. You will also see a raise hand button, which we will not be using, so you don't need to click it when asking a question. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, please call ReadyTalk's toll-free technical support number at 1-800-843-9166. Make sure to have your registration confirmation available. Finally, after the webinar has concluded, you will have the opportunity to give us feedback through a short survey. We ask you to take a minute and complete the survey, which helps us to improve our future presentations. And with that, I'll turn the conference over to Tiffany Perrin, Program Officer for Healthy Living.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Annie, for the introduction. I'm excited to be talking with you guys all today, although I have to confess that it's very weird not to see people. I'm not a huge fan of webinars for that reason. But at any rate, let's get started. So I imagine some of you have looked at the past webinars on this funding that are posted on our website. So if you haven't and want to better understand the funding opportunities broadly, where they came from, and what we're hoping to partner with you on and that sort of thing, please make sure to take a look at the one from December 8th of 2015, and then the one from January some date, I'm not sure, walks through kind of the application process. So when you actually go in to enter your information, recognizing that that can sometimes be a little bit daunting and varies from funder to funder, we wanted to walk folks through that. And I don't think a whole lot has changed since February, so go with that. Today we're going to focus on the two local funding opportunities as they are the ones that are currently open. I'll talk about all three of them, including the systems level, in a minute. But today we're going to focus on the local ones. I do want to spend the bulk of time today responding to the questions that you guys have. Having spent most of my career in the nonprofit arena, I have absolutely no doubt that you guys know everything that's posted on the website as well as I do, and already have a bunch of questions. So I'm not going to belabor that too much. I am going to do a quick overview of the funding opportunities in case you haven't had a chance to look at it. So the Creating Healthy Schools funding opportunities came out of a pretty extensive stakeholder engagement process in conjunction with the broader Healthy Schools collective impact effort that many of you are involved with, or at the very least aware of. It was an imperfect process, to be sure, but hopefully you see some of the changes, or you see some changes that resonate with you, and you'll help us to continue to improve and refine the work going forward. And I say that in the context of knowing that in August 2014, the Colorado Health Foundation's board approved a 10-year commitment to the Healthy Schools efforts. So we're in this for the long haul, and when I invite you to provide feedback, know that there's time to actually use it over the course of the funding opportunities. So just a little context also on the February 2016 deadline for those of you who are interested. The Foundation received a total of 46 grant proposals, including 17 for local implementation, 10 for local planning and assessment efforts, and 19 for the statewide systems efforts. It's definitely been an exciting process, and we've learned a lot. One of the things we've learned a lot about is what's helpful to local applicants in applying. So we're going to try and incorporate some of that feedback we've got into what we're talking about today. So in terms of the overall funding strategy, throughout the co-development process, we heard very clearly that it's important to get dollars directly in the hands of districts and the folks that are doing the work on the ground. You all have the expertise and understand your students and communities. At the same time, there was recognition of and real appreciation for the role of state-level infrastructure around things like professional development, data, policy, and that sort of thing. So we're supporting both. Of the $24 million over 2 years in grant funds that are available for this work, half is going to go to systems level and half to local grantees. The systems funding opportunity was only open for the February deadline, and we're quickly approaching decisions and kind of advancing those recommendations for the Health Foundation's board to consider and making those grants, which is exciting and exhausting all at the same time. While the distinct local and statewide systems approaches are both really critical, I do just want to emphasize how we view this as supporting each other both at the local level and within the state level, but then across those levels. So the work at the systems level should be informed by the work that's happening on the ground, and by the same kind of token, the statewide work is meant to be a resource and tool that the local folks can be using. All right, cruising right along here. So I'm going to go through these next couple of slides really quickly with the intent of going back to them as you have questions. Because based on experience with the February cycle, I'm pretty sure I can guess what your two biggest questions are. One, which one am I? Am I planning or an implementation grant? And two, how much money can I ask for? So in the interest of getting to those, let's jump through these. So at the local level, we have the local planning and assessment grants. Those are meant to focus on local planning and assessment around kind of the whole continuum of the whole school, whole community, whole child work. So comprehensive physical activity, supportive nutrition environments, health education, student health services, and all of that. Not just comprehensive physical activity and nutrition, which I'll talk more about in a minute. We recognize that as you're doing planning and assessment, it's important to do that comprehensively and consider all pieces, even if you might choose when you move to implementation to start with particular pieces of that. Eligibility requirements. So you must participate at the district level in the National School Lunch Program. Because these grants are available to charters and innovation schools, and we recognize that things are a little bit different in that context, we're open to recognizing that charters may not be participating in the National School Lunch Program, but if they're otherwise kind of demonstrating, being in alignment with the goals and priorities of that, then we're open to that. A group of charters can include a coalition or network of schools, so perhaps a charter management organization or a group of 2 or more schools with a formal relationship. Proposals should include, okay, so there's the content areas again on the left side, and then on the right side, here are the things that I really want to emphasize. One, that it's a comprehensive plan. 2, that the plan, and I guess your plan for developing the plan, how that will be developed with input of students, families, teachers, and other key stakeholders. Because we're prioritizing health equity in the work, engagement is absolutely key to that. It's important to see leadership support, so whatever that looks like in your district, whether that's superintendents or other folks that you want to demonstrate support from, that's important. And then aligning with the whole school, whole community, whole child model. Local implementation, so the other funding opportunity. What you'll note is different here is that for implementation dollars, we are only in a place to support comprehensive physical activity programs, supportive nutrition environments and healthy food and beverages, and then cultures in schools that are supportive of student and staff health and wellness and health education, to the extent that those latter two are inclusive of physical activity and nutrition. The reason for this is simply kind of the priorities and the targeted goals, if you will, of the funding from the Health Foundation. Those are the things we're prioritizing. And given the broader context of the Healthy Schools Collective Impact effort, really wanting to see additional funders and existing funds leveraged in support of some of those other areas like behavioral health and student health services. Not because we don't also value them, we absolutely do and see their importance, but in thinking about kind of leveraging all the dollars in the school space most effectively, it seemed like it was important to prioritize our dollars given our mission. All right, so the eligibility requirements are largely the same, and I'll talk about this more when we're talking about the grant size in a minute here, but for implementation dollars, we are prioritizing for high need districts. For us, we define that as 50% or higher free and reduced price lunch and or majority minority enrollment. We heard a lot of feedback from rural communities that FRL isn't always the best measure because of just kind of small town dynamics and concerns around confidentiality and all of that sort of thing. So we are open to, for districts with between 40 and 50% FRL, other data to kind of make the case that they are high need as well, and we can talk more about that. Districts that are below 40% FRL or who aren't considered high need can also get dollars, but we're looking at those as matching dollars rather than just a straight out grant. And the intent there is to leverage district dollars and other public dollars in addition to the philanthropic dollars from the Health Foundation. Okay, so here's the big question, right? Which one am I? Am I planning or implementation? Really good question. So let's see, it kind of hinges on whether you have a, let's go here, comprehensive school health and wellness plan, right? So if you have one, awesome. Let's talk about an implementation grant. If you're wanting to develop one or maybe revamp an existing one, or you kind of think the one we have is really great, but if we're thinking about it, it wasn't really developed with stakeholder engagement and that's something that we want to go back and do. That's great too. Let's talk about a planning grant. So two of the most commonly asked questions are, what is a comprehensive school health and wellness plan, and what if I'm in the middle? I'm not really implementation, but I'm kind of really far ahead with planning. So one, truly, that's just a term we landed on to talk about the work. It's not copyrighted anywhere. It's not a CDC thing. It's just a combination of words to make sense of what we're talking about. There's no template, and we anticipate that plans are going to look different across the districts. Basically, we're asking you to take a careful look at what you have in place and ask yourself questions like, does the plan address school health broadly, consistent with the whole school, whole community, whole child framework? Does the plan address equity? Do we have leadership buy-in and support? Was the plan informed by district data and best practices? Do we feel like it's understood to be the plan? In other words, is it a plan that only those who are involved with it know about, or is it really seen as the guiding go-to framework for healthy schools work in the district? So I'd ask you to kind of reflect on those things and understand that those are the conversations, if you seek an implementation grant, that we're going to want to have with you over the course of grant review. And then in terms of being in the middle, that's absolutely okay. We know that some of you are, and we want to support that. So a reasonable portion of the planning grant can go to sustaining existing healthy eating and comprehensive physical activity efforts. We don't want to see those things go away, and we know that those can be really crucial in sustaining will around planning. But before we can really support expansion or broader implementation of that, we'd want to see a plan in place. And then just another thing I wanted to acknowledge is I think that in some of the kind of documentation you guys have already seen, we probably over-communicated to districts that were new, that maybe haven't engaged in this space before, and made some assumptions around existing partners and folks that have been doing this work, and kind of thought to ourselves like, oh yeah, we can figure that out, that'll be fine. But it didn't necessarily come through in the funding opportunity documentation. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and apologize for the confusion. But let's definitely talk regardless of where you are on the kind of planning and implementation continuum. So, okay, big slide here. Don't worry, this will be available after the presentation today, and we have a prettier version of it up on the website now, a PDF version that doesn't have those weird carryover Ds at the end of anticipated, which makes me crazy. At any rate, so let's see, what do I want to say about the funding? Let me shift to my page that has the notes on that. So probably the biggest piece of feedback that we received was around the funding level. Folks wanted to know what the anticipated grant size was. We didn't provide this information prior to the February deadline for a number of reasons. One, it was frankly kind of still being hashed out. And I think there were some concerns about how it would be received. but it's totally understandable that folks want to know where we're coming from. It does feel like a bit of a risk in that there are many caveats that we need to include. I had a list of, I don't know, like 10 asterisks that I wanted. So my communications colleagues absolutely love me for that. But, and then the other thing is, even if we're clear that these are max grants, so anticipated maximum grants, there's the concern and kind of tendency that folks will expect that, oh, this is the grant level I can get. And that's not necessarily the case. So please take this in the spirit that's intended, trying to give you kind of broad parameters for the general space to aim for, understanding that on a case-by-case basis and considering a number of factors, the grant size may look a little bit different. So yeah, and this is also kind of a beta version, so we're working to make it clearer and prettier over time. A few things to call out on this slide. You will see that districts with lower FRL are looking at much smaller maximum grants. That was absolutely intentional, and it was also not necessarily a popular decision among some. You can probably guess where folks fell out on that. As you surely know, many grants in the school space set eligibility at 50% FRL. If you're not that, then you're just not eligible for the grant. And so we're doing things a little bit differently. Districts with lower FRLs can still get grant dollars. They're just going to be proportionately smaller. And for implementation, as I mentioned previously, we expect matching dollars. The goal is to help Healthy Schools champions in comparatively more resourced districts leverage public dollars. Now, before you throw things at the computer screen, I do want to acknowledge that given Colorado's school funding climate and the ever-increasing demands on schools, all schools have need. We absolutely understand that. As we think about the overall funding picture for schools, philanthropic dollars are just one piece of that, and we have elected to prioritize the Health Foundation's dollars for reaching high-need students at this time. That said, we're also supporting a host of systems-level Healthy Schools work, much of which will support schools across Colorado regardless of demographics. And really critically, this includes investments to support improving the public financing for schools, because as well-resourced as the foundation is, and that's fantastic, our dollars are just a drop in the bucket of the broader financing picture, and there needs to be changes there. So again, this will be available after, so don't panic when I change the slide. So just real quickly, going to flash this up here. It's a theory of change. Everyone loves theories of change. And for the broader Healthy Schools collective impact work that's going on, just wanted to say that this work is all seen as kind of in support of and alignment with that. The theory of change is a living document, as they often are, and will shift over time, but just wanted to give you that context. And then as you think about a grant, what that means for evaluation expectations. So one, we're encouraging you to use existing data systems, SmartSource, and the Healthy Kids Colorado survey. It's not a requirement, but we would definitely want to understand if you weren't choosing to participate in and use those, the reason for that. And then again, relating to the theory of change, we may be asking you to participate in a minimal amount of evaluation activities related to the broader collective impact evaluation. So things like the occasional survey or interviews and reporting on your key activities and outcomes. Okay, so now I think we're ready for questions. Please feel free to ask. I'll turn it back over to Annie, but just wanted to say, ask any questions you have. Definitely don't hold back. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tiffany. So we'll go ahead and start the question and answer portion of the webinar, and I'm seeing a couple of them come in. So we'll just go in the order that they've arrived so far. The first question is, does this opportunity include early education schools?
Does it? So no, at this time the funding opportunity is for kind of PK-12 school space. The Health Foundation is developing and doing work in the early childhood space and developing a funding strategy, but at this time we don't have any funding opportunities open there.
Great.
Man, they're coming in fast and furious. This is fun.
So the next question is, if multiple districts are planning to come together to submit an application, how should we calculate funding amount for a planning grant? Should we calculate an average FRL across districts?
We can talk more about that. What we've done with the February cycle was kind of take the funding amount that each district would be eligible for if it was applying independently, and then kind of add those up. That's how we've approached it in the past. And I think that's how I'd want to approach it this time around as well. We're trying to be really kind of equitable and consistent in making these grants. So that would be the approach there.
Great. And is there a way to find out what districts are looking into this funding?
I guess I'm not sure. I can probably share, not off the top of my head, but which applied in February. And I think that there may be an opportunity with my communications colleagues to kind of post on a rolling basis when grants are made. In terms of who's interested, actually I would love for you to share that information with me. We are trying to get a sense for who's interested and trying to cultivate that interest. But we did not, so for some of you who may have paid attention to the February cycle, we included a, what was it? Intent to participate form, not a letter of interest, but intent to participate form to try and get a sense for who would be applying in February. It was really low lift, but we found that it was of limited value to us in that it really didn't reflect the number of grants, the number of applications we ended up getting. It did inform some of the webinars that we developed and all of that sort of thing, but anyway, all that is to say is we didn't do that this time, so we don't have a good sense for how many applications to expect in June or from which districts.
Great. And our next question is, as far as requesting expenses, would it be eligible to request for a playground?
Did it say if that was planning or implementation? No. Okay, so that's a good question. I'll kind of answer it from a broader perspective. So in terms of specific programs or activities, so playground might be one, or something in your school food environment or something like that. We can support those things as part of an implementation grant, but it would have to be based on an existing comprehensive school health and wellness plan. So let's say you went through that planning and a playground was prioritized and you're saying, hey, we want to move forward with that, then absolutely. On the other hand, if it's just sort of, hey, we want a playground, here's the reasons for it, but it's not really embedded in a broader plan, then that would be a question and a concern, and I think we would be challenged to move forward with that. Certainly happy to talk more on a case-by-case basis, but basically if you're proposing work for implementation, we would expect it to be reflected in an existing plan.
And our next question is, the chart looked like a match is only required for implementation grants. Is this correct?
Yes. Good job paying attention. And good job to the communications team, including Annie, for communicating effectively. But yes, for planning grants, we made the decision to kind of offer up grants across the board regardless of FRL. What you will see is that they are scaled according to level of need and district size, such that larger, higher FRL districts get considerably larger, are eligible for considerably larger grants than smaller, lower FRL. And then for implementation, again with that idea of sort of looking to the future and sustaining work and leveraging public dollars, we would look for matching dollars from those districts that are not considered high need based on our criteria.
Great. And our next question is, are community partners eligible to apply for grant funding to help schools? We partner with schools to develop school wellness team plans, but don't necessarily have the funding dollars for them to implement. We work with 9 schools in Northeast Denver currently.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, yeah, community partners can apply on behalf of the school district, or districts in this case, if that's kind of understood. I'm not sure that we're explicitly requiring an MOU, but we would anticipate seeing a letter of support signed off by leadership from those districts that are saying yes, for a variety of reasons it makes sense for this community partner to apply on our behalf rather than applying as the district. Another thing, and I'm not sure that this was your question, but just to flag, is that we are looking for district-wide efforts regardless, and of course charters and innovation schools, but when we're talking about school districts, we're looking for district-wide work as opposed to 3 schools within this district or whatever, that it's a district-wide thing.
Great. And the next question might be one for grant making operations, but I will throw it out to you just in case.
Give it a whirl.
So I had problems getting a login during February, and it did not recognize my school or my school district. How do I get this login information?
That is definitely for our grants team, but if you want to email myself or Annie, or just put it in the questions. At any rate, we have your name who's asking this question, and we'll get back to you and connect you with our grant making ops team. And if anybody else experienced that, definitely let us know. And I apologize for that complication.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, feel free to reach out to me. And our next question was asking, will the webinar be online for those who weren't able to join or who joined late? And yes, it will be online by tomorrow afternoon, and everyone will get an email with a link to the presentation as well as the audio recording. So we should be good on that. So next question for Tiffany is, are project managers expected to be school administrators or school districts?
I think that the project managers can be, we would leave that to the discretion of the applicant in terms of where that's best housed. But yeah, we are looking for district-wide efforts, but again, kind of the project manager could kind of sit anywhere. So hopefully that addresses that question.
Great. And a follow-up question. So individual schools cannot apply. My school is a nonprofit.
Well, that's potentially correct. So if you are a charter or potentially an innovation school, we could be open to that. You would have to be a collaborative if you're a charter school, but if you are part of a district, then we would need to see a district-wide effort.
Great. And then we had one participant let us know that the funding chart was not fully visible on his device, but we do have that on our website as well, right?
We do have it on our website, and I applaud your being technologically savvy to use devices for these sorts of things. I wouldn't even know how to do that. So.
Great. Well, at this point we don't have any additional questions, so I think we can wait a moment or two and encourage anyone to submit their questions via the chat function. Unless you have any other comments at this point. Tiffany? No,
keep the questions coming. I can click back to slides that we were already on. Whoa! Oh, that's Laura from Ready Talk. Sorry. Yeah, I can click back to other slides if you guys want to revisit any of those. And I guess the other thing that I would just mention and want to be really clear about is I'm always very open to questions. I do have to confess that I have not been as responsive or proactive as I like to be, in part because I've been buried with the February cycle because we had all 3 funding opportunities open. But I'm hoping that as we move forward and we just have the 2, that I will get back to my usual responsive, proactive self. But please never hesitate to call me. Thanks in advance for your patience, and definitely hold me accountable if I'm not getting back to you as quickly as you need to. I don't mind a little gentle or otherwise scolding to tell me to get back to you. Great. And our next question is, how can we learn more about the funding opportunity for systems level work? Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so the funding opportunity was only open in February, and the reason for that was wanting to get the system really up to speed and kind of consistent so that they can interact with and leverage all the good work that you guys are doing, and also provide kind of resources and supports that are valuable to you, and not constantly have that changing if we have multiple grant deadlines. We are finalizing those kind of recommendations and advancing those for board approval in the coming weeks. So I'm hoping to be able to kind of come up with a summary to share with everybody, both as sort of a menu of services, if you will, for our local grantees and more broadly, and then just for folks to kind of understand the broader picture. I think that we're not in a place to do that right now, just because the decisions aren't final, but I'm certainly happy to talk with folks about the kinds of work that's likely to be supported. As I mentioned, there's things like professional development, some of the work around policy, and then communications, as well as kind of data and evaluation are the big areas that the work would fall into. But yeah, reach out to me and we can talk more about what that looks like. Great, thank you. And we had a quick question about your contact information. So go to that next one. And Annie told me about this to make sure that I put that slide up when I was talking. There it is.
Well, thanks. And then one more question is, where can I obtain information about previous grant recipients and their projects?
So I'm not sure if you're referring to kind of previous grants that we've made in the healthy school space or specific to kind of this funding approach, so the February deadline, for example. I think that there's a number of different places, and maybe Annie and I can talk after the webinar here to provide some of those links as well in the email that she said she was going to send out with the webinar recording and all of that. I think that candidly that's something that we could do a better job of kind of synthesizing and sharing back out, and certainly something that will be part of this funding strategy. So as we get information and are able to kind of post who are the grantees from the February cycle, the June cycle, and going forward, and then again the systems level, trying to share that with everybody.
Great, thank you. So right now we don't have any additional questions coming in. We'll wait just a little bit in case we have some additional chat questions.
That's funny. I'm always like expecting the webinars to be like an hour, like full of questions. So you guys can let me off easy. That's fine. But if you have any others, please don't hesitate to ask.
Well, it doesn't look like we're getting any additional questions, but as Tiffany mentioned, her contact information is there. So we will go ahead and wrap up our question and answer period at this point. Tiffany, do you have any final comments for the group at this point?
Just saying thank you for your time today and your interest. I'm very much looking forward to connecting with you if I haven't already, and talking with you about the work that you want to do and all of that. So thank you.
Great. Well, thanks so much. And as a reminder, tomorrow all of the participants on the webinar will receive an email, and that email will have a link to the webinar recording as well as the presentation slides. We have one ask, which is don't forget to complete the short survey that will be available on your screen after we end the webinar, because your feedback will help us to improve our future presentations. Thanks everyone for joining us, and have a great day.